Okay, I just have a few more kind of, they may feel a little more speculative questions here, but just
Okay.
a little things to go back and tie up. So, we talk about back to like the China and US and that we're so economically tied. Do you think it's a good idea to promote states' interconnectivity, interdependence economically to promote peace? So certainly, like objectively, when they're more interconnected, they are. But then at the same time, if you're more dependent on another country, you lose some power in conflicts as well. So, like, as an individual nation, should we be trying to connect more, or should we be trying to be more self-reliant?
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to look at the push-pull that's present, right? If you're importing all your goods, you use control over the quality of those goods, for example, and the conditions under which those goods are made, right? If you're worried about environmental issues or human rights or, other kind of types of things that can be under the radar if you're not controlling the goods that you're purchasing, that can be a concern, certainly. But at the same time, we know that countries that trade with one another are much less likely to go to war with one another, and so that to that extent, this globalization can be kind of a peacemaker in itself. So I know, like, Russia and Ukraine are still trading with one another, which I think
I
is
was going
so
to bring that up.
interesting,
This
right?
doesn't make any
Right.
sense, right?
Yeah, I mean, Russia still needs its wheat, right?
Yeah,
And so, to some extent, I think that is an important way that you can create peaceful interaction. And even when countries are still at war, that they're able to trade with one another. I think that those meaningful interactions, there's the potential for them to grow as
I
well.
see. hmm You brought up at the beginning that there's more conflict this past year than ever before. Is that part of the noise? Is there a general trend of less violence, or is it just kind of random always?
Yeah, there's a trend that's actually more violence, and I'll send you this report so you can put it in the show notes too. So UCDP UPSLA Conflict Data Program just published their 2023 data that shows that there's 59 ongoing armed conflicts in the world. It's the most ongoing armed conflicts that they've recorded since like 1948, 1949, or something like that. There is kind of an upward trend from the last few years, starting in 2020. A lot of the casualties have been in Ethiopia and the Tigray region. That conflict ended, I believe, in 2022. And so, kind of the number of casualties has gone down. And certainly, kind of overall, since the end of World War II, we're seeing this kind of trend in the shifting nature of violence that we talked about, where you have not more non-state actors engaged in violence, but kind of the number of ongoing conflicts has certainly grown in the last few years, and we are seeing this kind of upward trend.
Okay, so people aren't crazy for thinking that the world's becoming more violent.
Yeah.
Before that, though, was it good or just sort of, you know?
Yeah, so they actually they have an interesting graph in the report that shows kind of violence over time. And so a lot of the violence spiked in 2020. Prior to that, there was a dip in the amount of violence. And so we've seen spikes due to Sudan, Israel, Myanmar. And so these kind of ongoing
I
long
see.
running conflicts are causing that increase over the last few years.
Okay, so it's really just cultural things that shift and sort of independent of broader things.
Yeah.
So, so are there any like technological changes or political changes that you see having a large impact on the number of conflicts, the type of conflicts that we see, things like that?
There are people that kind of talk about the different types of war and kind of generations of warfare as having
Mm.
changed. And so scholars of military history talk about, for a long time you would see like two militaries line up on a battlefield and then like charge at each other, right? And we don't really
Mhm.
see that anymore, right? That's
Yeah,
kind of a change in military technology that's happened. And another change that happened was like Germany created the Blitzkrieg tactic where they would go in and like kill all the people that they could and then get back out. These kind of lightning wars is what it translated as. And so there are some kind of technologies that enable different types of fighting. drone warfare is one that people talk about a lot now, and how, that you don't have to have somebody physically present to kill other people, right? Is this huge technology shift. I don't know that that necessarily changes the amount or types of war that we're seeing. It just changes kind of the way that war is being engaged. I mean, the same thing with nuclear weapons, right?
That's where I was
It's,
going. Yeah.
did mutually assured destruction was seen as the big pacifier during the Cold War, right? The US and Russia or USSR never engaged in direct military combat was largely due to this kind of idea that they would, explode the entire earth, multiple times over with all the nuclear arsenal that they had both created. But it wasn't really a peaceful time, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
just because the US and Russia, or the US and USSR, were not directly engaged in combat, there were a lot of proxy wars going on where they were arming other people and, killing other people. And so I don't really buy this idea that, technology is shifting and the nature of war is shifting. In the end, it's about, how do we get political leaders to communicate with one another and to, provide, information and communicate in a way that is going to enable peaceful negotiations.